6 past 8 Central African time. Welcome back to the show once again, and welcome for the first time if you just joined us. We're going to be kickstarting the show with a very, very important and interesting conversation. We'll be heading over to Pakistan. Last Friday, they celebrated 79 years of independence. But behind some of those celebrations is a bigger question. This after 79 years of independence, just how independent is Pakistan really? I'm sure we all know the history. Pakistan inherited many of its institutions from British India, and then experienced its first military takeover in 1957, 1958, and has gone through several periods of military rule since then. And today, questions about civilian power, about democracy, and the military remain very much alive. And we're going to be trying to unpack and answer some of those questions. Pakistan, very, very important global player, so it'll be amiss not to talk about them. That's why I'll be joined by Professor Junaid Ahmad, Director of the Center for Islam and Decolonisation, who's joining us via our virtual platform. Prof, good morning. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Really appreciate it.
Good morning. Lovely to be with you.
Pleasure is all ours. You wrote a really, really interesting piece on Pakistan, and I think it almost encapsulates the big question. 79 years on, 79 years later, is Pakistan truly independent? And in a nutshell, how should the world and Pakistan, I think most importantly, internally, view the last 79 years?
You know, this is the story, first of all, it should be said, not just of Pakistan. I think for many post-colonial nations, the idea was to obtain independence and sovereignty and your flag and hopefully dignity with the process of decolonization. And I think Pakistan, like many other societies, has suffered through what we can say is an incomplete decolonization process. And what I mean by that is that while we may have gotten our own flag independent, not just of the British, but also of the rest of India, the rulers of Pakistan, the ruling elite, time and time again. And the interesting thing in Pakistan is whether they have been military rulers or civilian rulers, have always collaborated with the imperialist powers, and particularly the United States. And you've had this recurring cycle. You mentioned the first military dictatorship of Ayub Khan. And at that time, it was very much being part of these Western pacts against the Soviet Union, the SITO, SATO, the Baghdad Pact, and so on. And then after that, under Zia-ul-Haq in the 1980s, and then today. And so the Pakistani elite, and especially the military elite, has always offered itself to the West in terms of advancing their objectives in the larger region. So, you know, it's certainly, we would not consider it independent at all in that sense.
You know, this is always an interesting conversation for me. The question of colonialism, its history, and some of the colonial systems that actually stayed behind post the independence, or as you mentioned, unfinished independence mission that various colonial countries embarked on. I want to focus on Pakistan specifically because as an African, you interpret it differently. When the British left in 1947, how much of that colonial system actually stayed behind to this day in Pakistan? What are some of the things we can point at and say, this is a legacy of British rule that stayed in the country 79 years later?
Unfortunately, too much of it has stayed and remains. I perhaps it'd be a bit unfair to just pick on Pakistan in that sense, but the British legacy in the subcontinent is a very interesting one. And in a country like Pakistan, it persists in such a pernicious way. And we just mentioning the whole role of the military in the political life in the country. That military is a colonial military, inherited from British colonialism. The other main institution that was inherited was the colonial bureaucracy. And up until the 1970s, both institutions pretty much wielded the same amount of power. at the expense of actual politics, at the expense of democracy, of the people, and so on. And post 1970s, we have seen the absolute domination of the military in
Mm,
Pakistani life. And again, that is I mean, just an absolute brazen example of how this colonial construction of this military, that of course was created by the British to control the unmanageable natives, as they would say, continues. And in the psychology, and again, this is something that uh, that intellectuals and activists in South Africa, people like Steve Biko and others,
mm,
spoke about the colonized mindset, and that has really remained. And these institutions, like the military and also the state bureaucracy, want those that type of an approach, that type of mentality to sustain, because it actually empowers them, it advantages them at the expense of the many who, just like the way the British did, they also, the military elite, the bureaucratic elite, and the political elite, they love to infantilize the rest of the population and basically perceive it as basic ignorant and should not be part of decision making in the country. So this is the struggle right now that
mm.
continues, to how to get that kind of colonized mindset out of colonized institutions that still remain.
And just to reflect back on the first military takeover, I think 1958 you mentioned, it happened just 11 years after independence. Historically, can we point at what could have went wrong so early on after independence?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about the Pakistan movement was that in some ways it was not the type of kind of a mass movement that was directly kind of calling for this independent state of Pakistan. Now, of course, many Muslims in the Indian subcontinent wanted some type of a political setup in which their cultural, religious, and so on rights would be respected, and then many, of course, I mean, this is kind of the history of the Pakistan movement, but of course, then many felt that within the Indian Federation that they would be discrimination against them. And some of them have obviously say that they were proven correct with the rise of the BJP fascists in India. So, but the idea was that we need this separate state and so on. But the problem was there was no kind of mass political action within the areas that then formed Pakistan, right? I mean, the Congress Party, etc. That was largely in the Indian part of the Indian subcontinent. So within Pakistan, then the problem became that those colonial institutions were the most powerful institutions, the military and the bureaucracy. So then it doesn't become so surprising that they would become hegemonic and dominant at the expense of kind of mass political movements, political parties, and so on.
I want us to take a quick break. When we come back, I want us to touch on India, because I don't think you can speak about Pakistan without the mention of India. The two are so intertwined. And also maybe look at the creation of Bangladesh also, I think in the 70s also, and just how much Pakistan should have learned from that experience that could carry them to the present and ultimately the future. I think there's still a whole lot more to unpack, but we'll do that after the short break.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Right now, over 150 million children around the world are orphaned, facing hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. With Islamic Relief's Orphan Sponsorship Program, you can provide a child with access to education, nutritious food, essential healthcare, and a safe home. Your sponsorship is not just support, it's hope, security, and a brighter future. Be the reason an orphan child smiles again. Sponsor an orphan today with Islamic Relief.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Are you banking with convenience, transparency, and flexibility? With Al Baraka Bank's transactional banking account, you can enjoy convenient everyday banking designed around your needs. Benefit from zero fees on point-of-sale transactions and manage your banking easily through Al Baraka's secure mobile banking app and internet banking platform. From everyday payments to managing your personal or business banking, Al Baraka makes banking simple, transparent, and convenient. Visit albaraka.co.za to learn more. Al Baraka, your partner bank. Al Baraka Bank Limited is an authorized financial services and credit provider.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salaila Makudir, and I'm still in conversation with the director of the Center for Islam and Decolonisation, Professor Junaid Ahmad. And we have a conversation of Pakistan, reflecting on the history, the colonial legacy, and also where the country currently finds itself 79 years after independence. And the headline question is, has independence truly been achieved? And I think this is a really interesting conversation, especially for us Africans listening right now, because the association between colonial rule very, very synonymous with the continent of Africa. Prof, thank you so much for staying with us.
Of course.
Before we went on to that short break, I wanted to touch on India, and I think maybe Kashmir specifically, and look at that aspect of Pakistani history and maybe just how much of it contributed to the military's influence, as we alluded to in the first chapter of this interview.
No, absolutely. I think that the military industrial complex, if you want to call it, of both Pakistan and of India, has depended on this rivalry that has been there since the partition in 1947. And on some issues, obviously, there are genuine grievances. Kashmir is, of course, the principal one, in which, according to the partition plan, a majority Muslim state should have gone to Pakistan, but the ruler, the Maharajas, decided to stay with India. And beyond that, it's just been the type of Indian brutality and occupation and militarization of Kashmir, which has made it one of the worst situations of oppression in the world, along with, say, Palestine. But what has happened is that an indigenous movement within Kashmir for self-determination, which the United Nations promised it, a plebiscite to decide what it wants to do for its own future. What has happened is that, of course, both sides, the Indians and the Pakistanis, have kind of used the Kashmiri freedom struggle for their own purposes. And then so when Pakistan then justifies this massive kind of defense spending and so on, it does so in the name of, well, we are trying to help the Kashmiris. Now, on the other side, the Indian government is constantly blaming Pakistan for this cross-border terrorism through Kashmir taking place and so on and so forth. Of course, ignoring the source of it, which is its own brutal occupation of Kashmir itself. And this has only gotten worse with the rise of many of, obviously, our viewers and listeners know of the rise of the BJP, of the fascist Modi regime. Yeah. And they're not just, of course, there in Kashmir, where the occupation oppression continues. continues, but the larger Islamophobic violence taking place in India today. So that is on the one hand, but the problem then becomes when the Pakistani ruling elite also really don't are not really interested in the actual cruelties and injustices being meted out to Kashmiris, but are more interested in playing these geopolitical games. And the interesting thing and the very sad thing right now is that even within Pakistani administered Kashmir right now, there is a lot of unrest, a lot of grievances and protests at the way that even they are being treated by the Pakistani state. So you have this situation in which on both sides, you have elite forces, of course, on the Indian side, a very fascist Islamophobic force, but that use issues such as Kashmir and other things as a means to justify their power, their authority, and their oppression.
Yeah, very, very important points there. I'm almost time traveling here, looking at some of the significant markers in Pakistani history. Fast forward to 1971, we have the creation of Bangladesh. From your perspective, where should that moment be placed in Pakistani history, and what should have been some of the key lessons that should have been learned from that experience?
That was a central moment in the history of Pakistan, a very, tragic one, but one that should have taught many lessons, which I think have not been learned from the experience. Viewers will know that the Pakistan that emerged from the 47 partition had two wings. One was the western wing, West Pakistan, and the other one, Eastern Pakistan, separated by about 1,000 miles of Indian hostile territory. So it was quite odd from the beginning. But the interesting thing was that later became Bangladesh, the East Pakistan, the Muslims of East Pakistan at that time were actually even more committed to the Pakistan movement than the ones in the West. However, because of the type of semi-colonial relationship that the dominant ruling elite in West Pakistan, particularly from the dominant province of Punjab, the way they had that relationship with East Pakistan and the grievances that it produced and the inability of the Western Pakistani elite to actually address those then led to the War of Independence in 1971 and the creation of Bangladesh. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the idea should have been to learn the lessons. We have just lost half of our country because of the way we have governed and ruled so in such an authoritarian fashion. But that still continues. And you still have other provinces of the country, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, KPK, bordering Afghanistan, Sindh, and now we're talking about as Kashmir as well. In all of these places in the country, you have unrest, you have deep cruelties and injustices, and you have, in some of them, like in Balochistan, you have like uprisings taking place. And this is what makes all of this so bizarre is that internally this is what's going on in Pakistan, and externally it's like this new, very, incredibly important geopolitical player that is mediating peace between all these different players, and so on and so forth. And so this is the kind of the massive contradiction in the state of Pakistan today. It did not learn the lessons of how to govern internally in a just way that distributes resources, power of representation domestically in much fairer ways. And it has not learned that lesson, but it continues to to engage in external behavior that only entrenches the power of that ruling elite and makes it subservient to the interests of, say, either Washington or some of the Gulf countries as well.
Interesting that you brought it back to the future, because my next question almost links with that, because since it's the adoption of the constitution in the 70s, I think, to present times, I think the most common denominator, and you kept on mentioning it, was the military and the power that they still wield in Pakistan. Let's talk about the state of democracy with all of that, with the reality of the ruling elite and the military being almost at the helm of every final say when it comes to the biggest political decisions in Pakistan. looking back at the 2024 elections, maybe what kind of a picture do they draw, or do they tell us about the state of democracy in Pakistan, or in modern day Pakistan?
Well, this is the other part of the story. The tragedy has been that the major political actors in the country, civilian political parties, principally two, the Pakistan Muslim League of the House of Sharif and the Pakistan People's Party of the House of Bhutto Zardari, that the cast of characters, these civilian politicians, have themselves been so corrupt and incompetent and inept that for ordinary Pakistanis, it really has not made a difference whether it's been civilian political rule or direct military rule. Their socioeconomic conditions and even their political representation has been meaningless, and they've been spectators to this basically these intrigues of the ruling elite. What happened, as you mentioned, in 2024? And of course, before that as well, the emergence of what you can call the movement, the political tendency associated with the very popular former prime minister, and of course before that, world famous cricketer Imran Khan. And what Imran Khan, when he emerges in the 2000s and then 2010s, and then of course wins in 2019, what he represented finally was a break from the old traditional dynastic political parties, which, as I said, again, for ordinary people, they were not much different than military rule. So he represented a break from that and became incredibly popular, mobilized the youth, because Pakistan had been so depoliticized. Young people were so disoriented. And then Khan comes, not only taking up in some ways two major issues. One is, of course, the domestic issue in terms of more social justice against corruption and so on, but very much during it being relevant during the years of the war on terror, so-called, in terms of opposing the war in Afghanistan, opposing the Pakistani collaboration with the United States in waging that war, and Pakistani military operations in the Northwest. And of course, he was proven correct. I mean, in all of these things, that the military solutions are not solutions for these issues. So he was incredibly popular, and he was elected. And in April 2022, there was a regime change operation supported by Washington to oust him for power, for the obvious reasons that this was not going to be that traditional politician in Pakistan that will just be subservient to the military and to Washington. And since that time, he and his political party have been brutally persecuted. 2024, as you mentioned, elections in which the political party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf (PTI), Khan's political party, could not even run under the name of the political party, yet still won the majority of seats in parliament, with Khan himself languishing in jail, which continues. So his popularity is still there. And what has happened, the major transformation, is that for the first time, as I was saying, the military and the perception of it in the other provinces, including in what was East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh, was always very negative, for the obvious reasons, because of its operations, its machinations in these places. But within the dominant province of Punjab, the military always assumed that the Punjabis will love us or respect us, and they always have. Khan changed that, and Imran Khan even convinced the majority of Punjabis that no, in fact, in addition to empire and imperialism in Washington, the domestic military elite, the establishment, is just as much as part of that whole system of oppression as the imperialist powers are. And that is why Khan and his political party are being punished so much, because they have fundamentally shifted the narrative now in Pakistan, the narrative around what Pakistani nationalism, what Pakistani patriotism is, that it's not just about being against India or being anti-Hindu, etc. It's about a project of social justice domestically and being sovereign and independent in its foreign policy.
There we go, Prof. I think we have just run out of time, because the history of Palestine is so long and so complex. There's so many more questions to ask you, but I think we're going to wrap it here for now. Really appreciate your time, and I hope we chat again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
There we go. Director for the Center of Islam and Decolonisation, Professor Junaid Ahmad, taking us into the very rich 79-year history of Pakistan as they celebrate independence last Friday. Really interesting conversation. Going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this. The following is a paid political advertisement.